Hi, my name is Liz, and I am a photographer based in Portland, Oregon. I used to work for ON1 Software, and now I am a full-time freelancer, and I run Elizabeth LePage Photography. These days, about 50 to 75% of my business is weddings. I absolutely love wedding photography. It was kind of an accident that I stumbled upon it, and it ended up being something that I really enjoy. So today I want to walk you guys through how I do some of my wedding photography edits. When you're working with a large amount of photos, so the last wedding I produced, it was about 300 to 400 images. You do a lot of batch processing, but every once in a while there's a very special image that you want to spend a little bit more time on, and that's what I want to walk you guys through today. All right, so we're going to be starting here in Photoshop today because I wanted to show you a little bit about how I work as far as an image that I want to spend a little bit more time with. Most of the time when you're working on weddings, you're doing a lot of auto adjustments in Lightroom, you're batch processing, you're doing smaller changes to an image. Every once in a while, I have a photo that I want to make big adjustments to, and this is a good example. Both of the people in this wedding were photographers, and they had seen this image and they really loved it, and so it was important to them that I spend a little bit more time on this photo as opposed to maybe some of the others. So I like to start in Photoshop. Most of the time I open an image through Bridge and make adjustments in Camera Raw when I know I'm going to be doing more advanced adjustments. The first thing that I like to do is retouching. Now, you can do this inside ON1, but this is the way that my workflow is. I love to start in Photoshop, and then I like to add effects in ON1 Effects 10. So my process is to start out here and use retouching tools. If you don't have Photoshop, most of the changes that we're going to make today, you can do inside the photo suite. So it really is all about what you're comfortable with. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see in my layer stack, I have two layers, my original background layer, and then I duplicated it and created layer 1. This is where I'm going to make any retouching changes. If I make a mistake, if there's something I don't like, if I come back and I'm like, wow, I removed that and it wasn't super great, then I can remove this layer and start again from scratch. So I really recommend that you duplicate your layers before you make retouching adjustments. You can also double click it, and I'm going to relabel this retouching just so I know what it is. Now, on the left-hand side, I'm going to select my spot healing brush. We'll go ahead and use that. And up in the tool options bar, I almost always leave on content aware. This is huge. It's exactly the same as the perfect eraser inside of the photo suite. So you, again, can do this exact same thing inside of any of the programs that have the perfect eraser. So once I've got that selected, I'm just going to go through and I'm going to remove a couple of the distractions that might be there. There were a couple of posts in the background, and I don't particularly like them. I think they're kind of awkward looking, and they're, again, a little distracting. So these are small potato adjustments. These are not huge things. If they had their faces in the image, I might spend a little bit more time with retouching there. But these are just small little adjustments that I want to make, things that I think are a little bit distracting. So usually it's like a little stain in the road, a little piece of gravel that I think is obnoxious. These little green mossy spots on the left-hand side are kind of annoying. So again, these are small changes, but I just kind of want to show you how I work here in Photoshop. The next thing that's really important to me to do here in Photoshop is dodging and burning. Dodging and burning is selectively lightening and darkening parts of your image. So for me, the way that I like to do it is by creating two curves adjustment layers. Up in your adjustments panel, if you click to add a curves adjustment layer, this is a graphic representation of the shadows, midtones, and highlights in your image. And what we're going to do is we're going to create two layers. One is going to be for lightening and one is going to be for darkening. So we'll start out with the lightening. When you see your graph, what you're going to do is click the middle to add a point and drag it up. Now, you're going to see this huge change on the image. It's going to get so bright, it's crazy. That's exactly what we want. Now, once we do that, go back down to your layers stack and invert the layer mask. If you're working on an adjustment layer and you click the mask, it'll open up something called properties, and these are the mask changes that you can make to your image. You can just click the invert button. And now it goes back to normal. You can't see a single difference. We're going to do the exact same thing. We can go back to that adjustments panel, open up another curves layer, and we'll just do the opposite. We're going to click and drag down to darken the image. So go ahead and make it pretty dark. Click that mask one more time and click invert. Now, again, you're not going to see any changes to the image, but we have two layers. The one on top is going to be your burning or darkening layer. So I'm going to double click and we'll call it that so we know. And then the first layer is our dodging or lightening layer. Now, to go in and to lighten and darken, we're just going to select the brush tool on the left-hand side. Go up to the tool options bar and adjust your flow to 3 to 4%. Now, the reason why we use flow is because it's buildable. Now, what I mean by that is if I click and drag to lighten an area of the image, I'm just going to paint on this spot where the teal of her dress is. As I paint, it's just getting lighter and lighter and lighter. It's building up that lightness until it's almost blown out down there. What opacity is not buildable. So if I drop opacity down to 3, and I go in and I do the same thing, as I'm painting, there are no changes. It's not getting any lighter as I'm building with my brush. So what I like to do is go in and use flow because everything is buildable and I can kind of paint back and forth. And it's a lot more like using an actual paintbrush. Very rarely do you just make a stroke and you're done. You usually want to kind of build up in certain spots. So once I've got that all set, I'm going to go in and I'm going to lighten up a couple parts of the image that I know I want to be a little bit brighter. So we're going to lighten up their arms and their clothes a little bit. We want them to stand out. I want to lighten up her legs and I want to lighten up her underside of the dress. She's got that really cool teal petticoat going on down there, so I'm going to brighten that up. I'm going to lighten up some of the shadows on her wedding dress. I'm going to do the same for him. I'm going to lighten up his shirt and I'm going to lighten up his shoes. So we'll go in and do that. There's an odd shadow in between them right here. I want to brighten that up just a little bit so it's not quite as obvious. So we'll use that on both sides. There are a couple areas of the concrete that are a little bit darker. So I'm just going to kind of make broad strokes to brighten those up. Now there isn't a ton of lightening that I want to do with this image. It's a lot more of selectively darkening parts of the photo. So we're going to go ahead and click on our burn layer here. And we're going to paint over the areas like his pants. We want to make sure that those are nice and dark. I am going to paint over parts of his camera up here. These guys were both photographers, so they had cameras with them all day. It was really fun. And then I want to darken up the background a little bit. So I'm just going to kind of click and drag very slowly over these spots in the background. I'm keeping a nice, big, soft-edged brush here. You don't have to be very exact. This is not an exact science at all. Every photo is going to be a little bit different. Now, just with these two layers alone, I want to show you how it looks before and after. This is the power of dodging and burning. This is what we started out with. The photo is a little flatter than I want it to be. There isn't as much contrast. And this is with selective dodging and burning. The couple is standing out a little bit more. The areas that needed to be lightened, like her legs, her shoes, her arms, they're all starting to stand out, and the background is starting to fade a little bit more. There's less of a shadow in the middle. A lot of things change just with a little bit of quick dodging and burning. Now that I'm done here in Photoshop, it's time to go in and add a preset. So I need to make sure that I create a photo-based layer to work on. I'm going to press Shift, Option or Alt, Command or Control, and the letter E. Now what that's doing is it's creating a composite layer. It combines all of the layers from down below, the background, the retouching layer, and the dodging and burning into one photo-based layer that I can now bring into Effects. On the right-hand side of my screen, I'm going to click on the Effects panel to open it up. I'm going to select ON1 Effects 10, and we'll go ahead and double-click Open. Now once inside, I'm not going to spend a lot of time working on a preset here. There are a couple of filters that I want to make sure I point out. These are the filters that I use on most of my photos that I'm bringing here into Effects. On the right-hand side of the screen, we're going to click Add Filter. And my favorite of all time is the sunshine filter. I don't know what it does to the photos, but it adds this beautiful, soft, contrasty glow to the image, which I think is so cool. The natural preset is almost always exactly what I want. You'll see the amount slider is at around 50. That's perfect. Every once in a while, I might drop it down a little bit. But look at the difference between our original photo and the sunshine photo. I mean, the contrast is just awesome. So this is one of my favorite things to do to an image. The other great thing about the sunshine filter is you can add a little bit of warmth. Most of the time I'm working with images that I want to have a warmer glow to them. So I'm just going to take that warm slider and move it over to the right. I'm going to click to add a filter one more time. One of the other ones that I use quite a bit is going to be dynamic contrast. When you're working on a photo that has a soft focus in the foreground or the background, the biggest thing about working with dynamic contrast is going to be painting it in where you need it. When I just flat apply it to this image, it makes the foreground and the gravel, as well as that soft focus background, look absolutely horrible. So I need to go in and I need to selectively paint it in on just the people in my photo. So over in the filters on the right-hand side next to the name dynamic contrast, you'll see that there's a little white rectangle, and this is our mask. If I open this up, I can scroll down and click the invert button. And what that does is it's hiding all of the dynamic contrast adjustments that we've made to this image so that I can selectively paint them in. So I already have a brush tool selected on the left-hand side. You want to make sure in your tool options bar you have the mode set to paint in. And then I'm just going to click and start painting over the couple. Now, you don't have to do this step. It really is going to depend on the photo. Not every image needs dynamic contrast. This photo, because it's not of their faces, it's mostly of their feet and their torsos. Adding the dynamic contrast is just another way to really make the couple stand out against the background. It's going to make all of those details pop, like their shoes and her awesome petticoat and all that stuff. So this is a great example of when dynamic contrast can be useful. There are going to be other types of photos, especially with weddings and portraits, where you don't necessarily need them. Now, the last filter that we're going to apply is going to be our tone enhancer, and this is where we're going to add the matte filter. This couple was very specific about the fact that they love the matte filter, so that's awesome. It's one of my favorite things to add to an image. And when you add the tone enhancer, it automatically applies adjustments to your image. Just turn that auto option off and then scroll down to the tone curve. Now, the tone curve is a graphic representation, just like the curves inside of Photoshop. So this should look pretty familiar. And what we're going to do is we're going to raise our shadows up, and we're going to drop our highlights in the top right-hand corner here down. So just click and drag the dots that you see in the bottom left and top right-hand corners. So we're going to drag our shadow slider up, and you'll already see the image is starting to get lighter. And then we're going to drag our highlights down. And again, you're going to see those highlights get darker. Now, right now, it just looks like there's a soft haze on the image. The way that you make a good matte is by anchoring the tones in your image to keep the contrast. So to do that, click and add another point on your curve. One is going to be down near the shadows, and you're going to click and add one up near the highlights. Now, to anchor it, we want to pull those new points back to this central diagonal line in your tone curve. So we're going to click and drag that shadow point down. You'll see those shadows go from this like weird soft fade to this nice like soft grayish tone. It's so much nicer. So that's looking a lot better. And we're going to do the same thing with the highlights. We're going to click and drag those. We still want our highlights to be nice and bright. We just don't want them, they're so dull if we just keep them dropped down there. So I want to keep that contrast, so I'm going to pull that up just a little bit. Now, the other great thing about working with the tone enhancer is I can make tone adjustments, but it will keep the fade that we just created in our tone graph. So if I go and I darken the image, all of those shadows are still going to be that faded soft gray. So you can do other adjustments here if you need to. So I might darken the image, maybe I'll add a little bit of contrast. I want to make sure that I recover some of the highlights because I want to make sure her dress doesn't get too dark, all these different things. I can make changes here, but it'll keep that fade for me. Now, before we exit the program, I want to make sure I save this as a preset. I'm going to apply this exact same thing to another image that'll open up into Effects. So I'll go up to my preset drop-down menu and click Save Preset. From here, I'm going to name it after the couple. So let's go ahead and call this Katie and Paul. And I'll go ahead and call this Road Preset. This was shot along a road that we found, and so there are a lot of different photos from this shoot. So I'm going to go ahead and save it as that. I'm going to place it in a category. I like to choose some of the prepackaged ones here. There's weddings, but you can add your own categories, which is really nice. And once I'm done, I'll go ahead and click create. Now, when I'm finished and I go ahead and click save, it's going to bring me back into Photoshop. And from here, I can continue making adjustments to my image. The best part about coming back into Photoshop is if there are a couple of other changes that you want to make that are a little bit more retouching or advanced based, you can do that here. So you've got a ton of different ways that you can keep your photo editing process going. But from here, I'm pretty much going to save this photo and move on to the next one. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about me, you can jump over to elizabethlepage.com. I run a blog where I talk a lot about the creative process and photography and how that works. I also am going to be starting online classes in 2016. You can jump over to that page and take a look at what I'm going to be teaching about. If you've got any ideas for what you want to learn about, jump over to my contact page and send me an email with a topic you're really interested in learning about. This past year, I've been focusing solely on photography and freelancing, so I'd love to get back into the education game. So please, please, please send me a note and let me know what topics you want to know more about. I would love to cater those classes towards people who I know are interested in photography, photo editing, and anything along those lines. So thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the future.